If you gathered every single ounce of gold mined throughout human history, it would all fit into a single cube measuring just 22 meters on each side. That tiny physical footprint has toppled empires, birthed global trade networks, and served as the absolute backstop for the modern financial system. Its influence doesn't come from any practical industrial utility. Instead, it stems from a unique capacity to solve a very specific human problem: how to scale economic trust across vast distances and generations. In the 3rd millennium BCE, commerce in Mesopotamia was highly localized. Farmers deposited staple crops like barley into temple warehouses, and those temples managed the local economy's ledger. This clay token features a cuneiform grid and markings functioning as a receipt for local goods. It worked perfectly for internal administration. But if a merchant traded with a foreign traveler, that traveler had no reason to trust the local temple's accounting. To trade with strangers, merchants needed a proxy for value that carried no counterparty risk. Gold, the transition metal with atomic number 79, offered strict indestructibility. It possesses absolute chemical inertness, meaning it never tarnishes, corrodes, or degrades over time. Because its physical properties guaranteed it would survive any journey intact, it evolved from a purely divine aesthetic object into a strict economic tool. It was the only material both parties could absolutely trust. Early cross-border trade relied on exchanging raw pieces of silver and gold, often called hacksilver. But exchanging metal by weight was a high-friction process. Every single transaction required precise scales and chemical assaying to prevent fraud. In the late 7th century BCE, the Kingdom of Lydia in Western Asia Minor solved this bottleneck by producing standardized stamped pieces of electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. Look at the embossed lion and bull motif on this early Lydian coin. That mark was an authoritative state guarantee of the exact weight and purity. With that guarantee, merchants no longer had to verify and weigh their money. They could simply count it. Removing the need to individually verify every transaction drastically lowered trade friction. This standardized currency model quickly spread throughout the Aegean, greasing the wheels of commerce that would eventually sustain the massive trading networks of the Greek and Roman empires. By putting a royal stamp on precious metal, economic trust successfully scaled up from agreements between individual merchants to the institutional level of the state. By the mid-19th century, gold strikes in California and later South Africa flooded the global market. This massive influx of supply helped integrate distant continents into a more cohesive trading network. This paved the way for the classical gold standard from 1870 to 1914. Major nations fixed the value of their paper currencies to specific, unchanging weights of gold. Because multiple currencies were tied to the exact same metal, their exchange rates with one another became completely fixed. To understand how this regulated global trade, look at this model of David Hume's price-specie flow mechanism. If a country imported more goods than it exported, it ran a trade deficit. Under the gold standard, that nation had to settle the difference by physically shipping its gold reserves to the surplus nation. As the deficit nation lost its gold, its domestic money supply shrank, causing local prices to drop. Meanwhile, the surplus nation received the gold, inflating its money supply and raising its prices. Eventually, the cheaper goods in the deficit nation became attractive exports again, and the physical flow of metal reversed, correcting the imbalance. Without any central global authority, the strict physical limits of gold forced isolated national economies to operate as a single, self-regulating international network. That automatic, decentralized system eventually fractured. The heavy debts of 2 world wars and the economic devastation of the Great Depression forced countries to abandon their strict gold pegs to print money and finance their survival. In 1944, delegates from 44 nations gathered at Bretton Woods. Their goal was to engineer a new financial architecture to rebuild the post-war world. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States, holding the vast majority of the world's reserves, fixed the dollar to gold at exactly $35 an ounce. Every other participating nation then pegged their own currency directly to the US dollar. Through this multi-tiered system, gold reached its maximum theoretical scale. A single physical commodity acted as the literal, mathematical foundation for the entire global macroeconomic order. Maintaining that strict peg proved impossible as the U.S. printed more dollars to fund domestic programs and the Vietnam War. In 1971, President Richard Nixon unilaterally severed the link between the dollar and gold, ending direct convertibility. This initiated the modern fiat era. Today, currency values float dynamically on foreign exchange markets. Their worth is dictated by government decree, central bank interest rates, and economic output, rather than any physical commodity constraint. Yet, despite losing its official status as currency, human demand for the metal never vanished. Around half of all newly mined gold is consumed as jewelry, driven by cultural institutions like India's wedding season and the Diwali festival. For billions of people who operate partially or entirely outside the formal banking sector, physical gold remains a highly reliable, decentralized store of wealth that exists completely independent of fiat currency regimes. Even at the very top of the financial hierarchy, the reliance on physical metal persists. Despite managing entirely digital fiat systems, the world's central banks continue to hoard thousands of tons of gold bars inside highly secure vaults. These apex institutions maintain these reserves because gold serves as a stable nominal anchor. When paper systems or algorithmic ledgers face extreme crises of confidence, holding a physical, universally recognized asset acts as a credible commitment mechanism. Over 5 millennia, our methods of commerce have continually evolved to reduce friction. From weighing clay tokens in Mesopotamia, to counting stamped electrum in Greece, to fixing exchange rates on paper, and finally trading on computer screens. The daily form of money will always adapt to the speed of trade. But as long as institutions are run by fallible humans, humanity's ultimate hedge against systemic collapse will remain a deeply scarce, completely indestructible metal.